Hello everyone, thank you for logging in and joining in. If you guys hear me, please use the chat available to you guys just so I know that you're alive and well and with us today. And that would be truly appreciated. So the technology is with us today. There you go. Thank you, Brendan. All the way from Ryerson. And Andrew, Yelena, hi Yelena, how are you? Ron, great from Tech Columbus there. Francesca, hi Francesca, great guys. Love to have you on board. My name is Ali. For you guys that doesn't know that, I'm the CEO of UBI Global, and today we've invited you guys to meet with us and talk with us and for this webinar, as we call Ask UBI, where you have the opportunity to talk with us about high and low. And thank you so much for some of the great questions that we got beforehand, which we are going to address today. So I also have today our Director, Research and Co-founder Dhruv Bhatli, all the way from Barcelona, Spain. Hi Dhruv, how are you?
Hi Ali, and hola to everyone joining in. Special shout out to Ron, Yelena, Ian, and Brendan. How are you guys?
They seem to be well. I muted their sound today. I think the only voices we should hear is me and you.
Okay.
So the idea is that we're gonna do this webinar for around 45 minutes, if we can keep the time. We have a presentation available for you based on the questions that you asked beforehand. It takes around 20-25 minutes. And then afterwards we're gonna have kind of a Q&A session. So please, sorry Brendan. So please, I think okay. So there's an echo. So Dhruv, I think we should do it this way. If when I talk, you mute, and when you talk, I'll mute. I think that's better. Is that okay, guys? Is that much better? Yeah, okay. So that's the issue. Thank you so much for pointing that out, Brendan and Francesca. Where was I? Yes, so around 30 minutes is where we have this presentation going on based on the questions that we've got from you guys earlier. And it's going to kind of be an interactive sessions where me and Dhruv ask each other those questions and try to answer them in the best possible way. If there's anything that you think around that question that we missed, please use the chat to share your thoughts. So we can address them. Otherwise, we have our lovely colleague with us, Nick Stafunsky, here in the back end, taking notes of all of the questions. And in the end, he's going to try to compile them, and then we will address them in the end as well. So please follow us, and let's make this kind of an interactive session. So, Dhruv, I think we are ready to start. I think that's kind of the background. So let's just kind of go ahead.
Perfect, Ali. So let me start by asking you something that we keep hearing all the time, and that I think is a fundamental question. So what are your goals? Why is UBI Global doing this studies, if I can call that?
Yeah, so for you that been following us since 2013, UBI has always been a research company. Try to figure out how to measure success when it comes to business incubation. And not so long a while ago, we kind of set a goal that we want to achieve. And that goal is that we, as a company here based in Stockholm, Sweden, is that we want to provide the entrepreneurial ecosystem with the necessary tools and insights to build, manage, and support sustainable business incubation models. What the entrepreneurial ecosystem is, I'm going to come to that a little bit shortly. But our scope basically at UBI is that we believe in international market and benchmark. We do research and best practices. We do impact analysis. We expanded this year when it comes to networks and events. We're going to touch upon that a little bit later. And then we also work quite a lot now with governmental support based on what you guys are saying and how you're performing. And we have some corporate activation as well. So a lot of actors that we are trying to help out there, again, with the goal to build, manage, and support sustainable incubation models. We're 12 full-time employees based in Stockholm, and it says actually Paris, France here, but Drew has moved to a more southern, nicer place, so we have him and the research team in Barcelona, Spain. So if you're ever there in Stockholm or in Spain, you're more than welcome to visit us there. And today we approximately have a network of 600 university managed or associated or affiliated business incubators that we regularly communicate with at least 5-6 times throughout the whole year. The entrepreneurial ecosystem that I was talking about a little bit earlier, we try to kind of visualize this on this slide, that we have put the university business incubators in the center, and it's with you guys that we want to work with and help you become better and really build those sustainable incubation models. You work with the startup entrepreneurs. We don't do that, and we believe that you are the best ones doing that, but we want to support you with the tools, with the best practices, with an international benchmark to help you achieve that. But we also understand that a business incubator is not a single entity in an ecosystem. It actually depends on many actors around it. For example, the governments, the investment community, the corporations, it can be trade associations, universities, and research institutes. And all of these, the ecosystem, we actually work with them as well, but in different ways, where we help them understand how the challenges that you guys have and how they can look at the data, look at the measurement, look at the benchmark, and how they can support you in the best way. So we have different projects with different of the actors, and I'm going to share 2 examples later in the presentation. So that's basically what we're trying to do, and the actors, the ecosystem that we work with. Drew, I have this question for you, because we also get that quite often, and it came around when we started this journey together, that why is the university aspect so important for UBI, and why don't we look at private incubators, for example?
Absolutely, Ali. In fact, the question should be, why don't we also look at private incubators there? And I think it's a very fundamental question. And right in the beginning, when we were discussing me, Yoel, about we need to benchmark incubators, we had a fundamental question. And the fundamental question was, how come universities that have all the infrastructure, that have all the research, that have this, if I can use the word potential, to produce potentially great companies, how come they're not able to produce, great success stories? And from there, kind of started the curiosity to know, hey, everybody talks about incubators, it's a new topic, and everyone's talking about the private ones. What's going on at universities? And what's even more interesting is when we speak of the infrastructure at universities, universities have the access, to the know-how. They have the access to technical expertise. They have the talent. It's the same students from universities that go on to create great companies. How come they aren't creating them at universities? So we started with this idea to start to identify what's going on at universities and to try to identify the reasons why university incubators, weren't creating as much buzz, weren't creating as much positive vibe, somewhere. And we were surprised. So we started with this idea, and we were surprised that of 20,000 universities that are there, okay, only a few of them have incubators. We estimate less than 20% of them have incubators, but they are doing great work. And from there started the journey to identify some of the university incubators around the world, and to also highlight, the great work that they are doing, somehow which has been missed so far, and which is where I think UBI, or at least our connecting to the goal that you were speaking of, is to highlight them and to show all the great work they.
I think Drew cuts off. I don't know why, but I think you got the basic idea of what he meant in terms of the infrastructure and the potential. Let's see if we can get Drew's sound up again. And those Spaniards in Catalonia, they want they have to build an infrastructure of IT and technology first before they want to become an self-governed state. So Drew, make sure that you have a good internet in Spain. Anyhow, to go back to the question, yes, the infrastructure, the market potential, but also, when we look at this segment, that university business incubators really needed an uplift, and we saw here a need from the market to help out and bring some value to this part of the business incubation. And I hope that you guys are thinking that we're on a good path here to lift up this segment and where nobody else is. Great, glad to have you back there, Drew. So now we're gonna go a little bit deeper into those specific, research questions that we get, where many of you guys are wondering, what's the difference between a ranking and a benchmarking? So Drew, let's see if the sound comes back again then.
Yeah, it's working now, I think, right?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I'm hoping the Catalonia internet works better this time. So it's a very fundamental question that you asked there, Ali, about ranking and benchmarking, because we're doing both of them. So from the UBI Global standpoint, ranking is for us to identify, based on performance, incubators that are doing really, really well, and to position them, in some sort of series, right? So we attribute scores to each of the incubators, and we order them into a series based on their performance. However, a benchmark is when we are comparing one particular incubator, from taking it out from one sample against the point of reference. If I was to give you an example, for ranking, we would identify, for instance, top 10 incubators in North America, right? When it comes to benchmark, there is no such thing as a top 10. However, we might compare one specific incubator to the top 10 incubators, their performance, and to assess how that incubator did. So a ranking is an order of a series that we do, and a benchmark is comparison of one particular incubator or a set of incubators against the point of reference to point out, how the incubator is performing against that benchmark.
Thanks a lot. So then comes kind of the natural question, is that how do we convert the benchmark into rankings then?
So this might be a misconception that we do the benchmark first and do the rankings later, but it's the other way around. The whole idea, when we are doing a benchmark process, is first to identify that point of reference. And that's exactly how we do it. We have a sample, more than 300 incubators, that participate in our benchmark. Of those 300 incubators, our first task is to we collect the data, we treat the data, in the best statistical using the best statistical methods that we have. We attribute scores, to that sample, to the whole sample, and from that sample we identify a reference line. But before we can do any kind of a benchmark, that reference line is also you can call a top list of some sort, right? So it's top performing incubators, and so the ranking step, in fact, comes before the benchmarking step. So we need to have a reference line before we can benchmark, before we can compare an incubator or a set of incubators to the reference line. So that's how the steps go. It's 5 basic steps, starting from data collection, going to data treatment, attributing scores to all the incubators based on their performance, validating the data that has been reported, because data is self-reported, and I think I will touch upon some of the measures we take as well to counter some of the self-reported data and to ensure there is no bias there. In the 4th step, we also identify a top performing incubator set, a group, and that set, which we also call rankings, is then used for benchmarking, and it is a reference line to which other incubators or a set of incubators is compared to.
Thanks a lot. So what we also understand is that okay, people understand the benchmarking part quite a lot, and the rankings, they understand the importance of it and how we do it. But then it comes, how we define the categories of the rankings and why we are doing it in the way we do. So many of the questions that we receive is that, well, how do you define then a university business incubator? How do you define a university associated business incubator? How do you define a university business accelerator? And the reason that we get this type of question is actually because we have these 3 types of rankings as well. And I think we should start beginning just with the definition of incubator accelerator, so we have that straight. Dhruv, would you like to take? Dhruv, is your audio disappearing again? Let's see if you can connect. There you
go. Okay. Yes, this is not the best day for internet here. Okay. So the question is, how do we define, an incubator and an accelerator? So, well, the way we have defined it is, what we have spoken to the experts, we have spoken to all the, key people in the industry, and I think the broad agreement that we have on this, and we at UBI Global are following this, is that a business incubator, obviously its primary objective is to facilitate entrepreneurship, and to support early stage ventures. The program that a business incubator is, it's a systematic program which is a mid or long-term program, and the focus is on extensive incubation process, which includes both services and infrastructure. And the important thing is, an incubator has a quality controlled intake and also a time-bound exit, right? So there has to be a process for the client companies to come into an incubator, go through an incubation process, and go out of that incubator. A business accelerator, on the other side, we notice more and more, is a fixed cohort-based program. So they are focusing on intensive mentorship and educational services, not so much on the infrastructure side of supporting client startups, but more on the mentorship. And the focus is to catalyze growth of ventures. And we notice that sometimes ventures are coming at a little bit later stage into the accelerator. Again, the objective is that there is a quality controlled intake and a regular time-bound exit for the graduates. I think the key difference to outline here is that an accelerator is cohort-based and focused more on the mentorship and the services that it provides, while an incubator is focused more on providing extensive incubation process, which might include both services and infrastructure.
Thanks, Drew. And I would like to add something here too, is that an incubation or an acceleration program, it's the word program, right? And that has a definition by itself, that it has a start and an ending. And there are places out there that they call themselves incubators, but they don't have a clear ending. There is no exit strategy. There is no graduation of some sort. And when it comes to those type of incubators and programs, we actually don't accept them in terms of our benchmark. There has to be um, some kind of exit of some sort, and I think that's important as well for you guys to know. So that was the incubator accelerator kind of discussion. Now we put a layer on it, which is the university aspect, and that's kind of what the question was about. So Drew, what type of university differentiation
So when it comes to incubation programs, and their relationship to universities, we're looking at three different categories. The first category we consider is a category we call university managed incubation programs. And these programs are majorly operated by the university. So university has a stake in the program or is directly operating the program. The other category we have is what we call university affiliated incubation program. This kind of program might not be managed by the university, but has a formal affiliation with the university, which means the university might have a business agreement, might have some sort of an understanding with the program, the category 2 university affiliated program, to support them in a more formal way. Outside of these two categories, we also have a third category, which are incubation programs which are associated with universities but do not have neither a formal affiliation or are managed by the university. They might work closely, they might have some sort of a tie-up, but it's not a formal affiliation of any sort for that category. And that's how we see these three categories. And I think when it comes to rankings, when it even comes to benchmark, to put the incubation programs in the right basket, it's very important to also look at this context meaning this relationship that they have. So we only compare incubation programs, which are similar to other incubation programs. For instance, we know the category 1 programs have specific restrictions because they're managed by the university and they cannot operate the same way as a category 3 incubation program does. So that's how we define it, by the relationship of the incubation programs with the university.
I think that you said it quite well, is that it's very important to look at this aspect when we do the rankings. And when we first started out, we had them combined, and then with all of the great feedback that we got from you guys, the participants, and also from the experts, that these three distinctions kind of came up quite fast. And there's a plus sign between university managed and university affiliated. And the reason for that, I think we'll come to the next slide. But when it comes to rankings, we are bunching these two together while we are separating the university associated ones. And the reason we are doing that is to really to make it fair when it comes to rankings, and also come to that famous expression that we should compare apples with apples and pears with pears. And the university aspect is important due to those restrictions and differences between the university affiliations versus the association out there. So I think we defined the incubator, accelerator, we've defined, or we tried to explain at least the university aspect of it. So Drew, how does this look like when it comes to the final rankings then?
I think, Ali, that we have defined this really well. This is a really good one for you to take, so you can explain the different ranking categories and also the upcoming rankings. So I think you should take this one.
Thank you. That's a nice bounce back, but I will glad to. So this is one of the things that we get most of the questions part. But again, a university business incubator, which is kind of represented with our green symbol and badge and the way we communicate, is the category 1 and category 2 university affiliation. And that is have always been our priority from day one, and we call it the crown jewel of our rankings here at UBI. For us, those are the ones that we wanted to support it. And that's how we started out in the first year. The second year, we got so many good feedback again, and some criticism from the first rankings that we did that said, well, the university associated ones, they should not be in that ranking, guys. You have to separate them because they work a little bit differently. They have some advantages or degrees of freedom that these category doesn't have. Can you do something else with it? So we separated that one and created a University Associated Business Incubator. For this year, we developed it even further while we separated the accelerators out of the University Business Incubator category as well. And again, from the great feedback that we got from you guys. But as you see, that we don't have a university associated business accelerator, meaning that taking care of category 3 accelerators. There we feel that we are not ready to take that upon. We have to really take a look at the framework again, how we use it. And we are also moving to the private sector when it comes to accelerators. And we would like to avoid that as well, to really focus on the university aspect. But we will see, of course, how this will develop over time. In terms of the rankings, we have the top 25 the world for the university business incubators, and I think we're going to keep that for the future to come, and that is going to again be our the crown jewel in this case. But we also really want to highlight the other business incubators, the associated ones, but we're going to do it in a smaller set. And then this year we begin with the university business accelerators also on a smaller set, and try to keep it that way. I hope that you guys kind of get a good sense of how we have done it and how we are developing and how we are trying to listen to you guys. And we'll see how we develop even further. There has been some requests and questions, maybe to even separate the managed versus the affiliated, but that we have those kind of discussions, with the research team, with our advisors, and with some key people, and we will communicate in due time. We promise you that, and keep you guys informed if there will be any changes for the futures to come. We got a question from Betsy here. I think it's relevant to take it immediately. Drew. So Betsy asked us, are the university business accelerators only ranked against each other?
Yeah, hi Betsy. Yes, it's a very valid question. So in fact, when it comes to ranking, the UBIs, which are category 1 and 2, are only ranked between themselves. The associated ones, which are category 3, are ranked between themselves. And the accelerators, which is what you are asking, are only ranked between themselves. So it's only in that smaller subsample or that subset that we position them or order them in that series.
Great. So let's move along. We also get this question quite a lot. How do you compare different incubators in different ecosystem in different parts of the world? This has to be kind of a great challenge for UBI, and I think this is how we attack them. Drew.
Thanks, Ali. So when it comes to benchmarking and trying to identify how to compare incubators to each other, I know firsthand, having worked with an incubator before, how complex it is. There are so many variables involved when it comes to incubation, and saying that one incubator is performing better than the other needs to take into account a lot of things, right? So in this case, when we do it, we realized that apart from just looking at performance numbers, both qualitative and quantitative, there needs to be some other adjustments, some other variables that we need to take into account. And these are some of the adjustments that we do, when we are comparing incubators. One, thanks Betsy for asking, but this is kind of connected to what you were saying, is that we identified incubators and accelerators as two types, and we do not mix them, right? So when we are looking at their performance, we are looking at both of them in their own type category, right? So we're not mixing an incubator's performance with an accelerator's performance. They are operating in a very different context, they're operating with very different resources and sometimes different ecosystems. So we keep them apart. So that's the first distinction we make when it comes to the adjustments we do. The other adjustment we realize is that all incubators, depending on their age, like how long have they been operating, have different types of access to resources, to network, to contacts in the marketplace. All of that has a significant role, significant impact on their performance. So we do not compare incubators, which are young incubators, with incubators that are mature incubators. And we've created 3 different age segments for those incubators. Those that are less than 4 years, we put them into the first basket. We call them the young incubators. Those that have been operating between 5 and 10 years, we call them the mid-aged incubators. And we put them in that basket only, and we only compare them to the other mid-aged incubators. And the ones which are mature incubators that have been operating for over 10 years, when we are assessing their performance, we are putting them in the basket with other mature incubators, right? So that's the second adjustment that we do when it comes to the benchmark process. The third adjustment that we do is to do with the size of the incubator. We're looking at 3 specific variables in this on this topic. First, we are looking at the resources that an incubator has. So the incubator budget is very important. To give you an example, if an incubator, let's say, had a budget of 1 million USD and created, I'm just taking one example here, and created about 100 jobs, and we had another incubator of the same age, same type, had a budget of 100,000 USD and created 100 jobs, the one which is with lower budget or with lower resources would actually gain more points, because with limited resources that it has been able to create higher number of jobs, right? To give you an example. The other thing we look at when it comes to the size of the incubation program are the number of employees. It's an indicator we realized over time that tells us a little bit more about the incubator and what the incubator has in terms of resources at its disposal. The third thing we look at are the number of incubator client startups. So how many client startups the incubator has? What kind of deal flow does the incubator have? So if we have an incubator which has, let's say, 100 client startups per year, to compare that incubator to another incubator which hardly gets 1/10 of that deal flow would not be fair, right? So we also keep that into consideration when we are doing the benchmarking process and when we are looking at the size of the incubator. Apart from these 3 that I defined about the type, the age, and the size of the incubator, we also create another distinction which is based on the sector of the incubator. So an incubator which has a dominant ICT group of client startups cannot be compared to a dominant life sciences or a biotech incubator. On average, a biotech incubator, the client companies would take about 5.5 years. To compare that to an ICT sector dominant incubator would not be fair. So we create another distinction of this sort. So these are the 4 adjustments that we do, apart from all the other adjustments we do inside the algorithm we have, which is quite complex.
I just added that slide. Let's see if I can remove what I also pointed out. That this is another slide also to really go to the ecosystem question as well. So Drew just mentioned all of those adjustments, layers that we put on when we are benchmarking, but we also have to take into consideration, where the incubators are located. So in this example, in what country? And so there are other sources out there, really good one. And then one, for example, is the GID GEDI index. I think it's the Global Economic Development indicator index of some sort, where it basically tells you which countries, which ecosystems out there are a little bit more advantageous than others, and we add that to our benchmark to make it a little bit more fair. So give an example that we have two equally similar incubators when it comes to their resources and types and university aspects from Sweden, where we compare it from, let's say, Lithuania. If they're equally good, the one from Lithuania is going to get a little bit higher score because the infrastructure there, when it comes to the ecosystem, isn't as developed or advantageous as the Swedish one. So we try to take a look at that. One of the challenges that I would say that we have is an ecosystem within the ecosystem. So for example, if we look at US, it's such a big country, right? There would be some advantages to be in the Silicon Valley versus to be in the Midwest versus to be maybe in Florida. And that would be the next step for us to try to figure out how to tackle that problem. And in Mexico, when we just had a presentation just the other week, there are also different states out there that said, well, in this area, we have this infrastructure, but while within this area we have that infrastructure, which affects the incubation performance. So we're always trying to look at the different aspects, but we have to kind of set the bar at some point, and we are using these resources, but it's always been developing over time, and that's kind of how we try to tackle the different ecosystem.
Two remarks, Ali. Thanks for pointing this out. Something we're going to talk about. One, that the GEDI index is the Global Entrepreneurship Development Index. Just to make it clear.
Thank you.
And the second thing is, you mentioned it really well, that we're looking at on the country level, but at times we're missing the second layer, which is the cities or like ecosystem inside an ecosystem. So for now, we have been using, especially for really developed ecosystems, we have been using something like a startup ecosystem report, where we identify the top 20 ecosystems, around the world. So for instance, US, you can find in secondary sources information about New York and San Francisco, for instance. The trouble for us, and the next step, like you said, for us, is to identify on a more detailed level from secondary sources those ecosystems on a more detailed, on a more detailed level, to the point that it's not only those important ecosystems, but tier 2, tier 3 ecosystems that we were able to identify. So that's something that I take on as a challenge for the benchmarks to come, to make it more and more, reliable, more and more accurate. We're pretty much there, but as any company that's working with data, we want to make it better and we want to improve it every day.
Thanks for clarifying that, Dhruv. I got this question from Ian that sent it out to us, I think was through Twitter, asking, are there some metrics that you weight more heavily than others for the global rankings? And I think to answer this, we should just give them some kind of brief of the framework before we dig deeper into the metrics. Yeah, Dhruv.
Thanks, Ali. So when we started out, we spoke to more than 30 experts, around the world, who work with incubation, who work with impact assessment, of incubators, who have first-hand experience of this. And when we discussed with them, ourselves, the consensus that we got was that when you're looking at an incubation program for ranking or for benchmarking purposes, you must look at 3 different pillars. So you must look at the value for ecosystems. So how much is the incubator contributing to the ecosystem? And there were 2 layers to it, the economic value and also the talent value. I'll get into them in just a bit. The second pillar was what kind of value does the incubation program provide to their client startups? And there are 3 layers to it, the competence level, on the funds or capital level, and the network level. And the third was how attractive the incubator was based on how the companies that have graduated from the program did, right? So these are the 3 pillars that we've identified, and we have been following it in our framework. I'm taking them one by one. So the first one, when we look at the value for ecosystem, the two layers. First, measures the economic impact that the incubator and its client startups generate for the economy. We call it economy enhancement. And the second, we look at how does the incubator and its client startups contribute to the talent and workforce development in the region. We call the second one talent retention. And the question that you had was, are there specific indicators, or specific metrics which have high weights inside this? And the answer is yes. So we have broken those metrics. We have a little over 50, indicators that we consider, and we have broken those metrics into different tiers. So we have a tier 1 metric or indicator, which has very high weight. We have a mid-level indicator, and we have a low indicator, which explains the performance of an incubator, but doesn't have that much influence, or doesn't explain to a greater extent the performance, of the incubator. Going back to the slide, we have the second category, which is the value for clients. Here we are looking at the incubator's capacity or ability to impart relevant skills to the client startups. We're looking at the incubator's ability to provide relevant access to funds to its client startups, and also the ability of the incubator to provide its client startups with quality access to marketplace, to the right network. And on the third pillar, the attractiveness, we're looking at the quality of the incubator services and premises, which makes it attractive. What is it providing to the client startups? And also at the post-incubation performance of the client startup that have graduated. For instance, have they been surviving? Have the client startups that have graduated, have they been merged? Have they been acquired? Have they undergone an IPO? Those kind of things we look at there. And like I said, all the indicators are divided into 3 different tiers. Tier 1, very important indicators. Tier 2, middle value or middle weight indicators. And tier 3, which are low or descriptive indicators, as we call them.
So to plainly, simply answer this question, are there some metrics that you weight more heavily? The answer is yes. If we're going to give an example under economy enhancement, job creation would be weighted a little bit higher. Post-incubation performance, for example, it would be the survivability and growth indicators. Access to funds, please, Drew, correct me if I'm wrong here, is in terms of the investor network that we look at. And those would be kind of weighted a little bit more heavily. Here's a list of all of them. We are developing, by the way, our research page on our website. You're going to see a better distinction next week, where we also do a more comprehensive research methodology document, where we gonna dig a little bit deeper into the metrics, and we get quite a lot of questions about this. And we can tell you that there's so many students, researchers, research institutes, university libraries, they're just asking about, hey guys, what to measure, because that seems to be one of the key things to try to figure out before you go ahead. And I think we found a good set of measurements. Now it's just about, like Ian asked, in terms of how we weight them and what's more important than others. Okay, let's move ahead. So, Drew, this is also something that we get, which is a valid. It's about reliability and validity, of the rankings and the benchmark. That how do we account for false data or cheating?
Yeah, so when it comes to making sure that the data we have is reliable and it's valid, especially because some of the data in the beginning is self-reported, which means the incubators are themselves giving us that data. We do a number of things. First of all, we have a standard statistical process to identify cheaters. Our system, anytime we have something with some number that is reported by the incubator, which is exceptionally high, or let's say exceptionally low, our system flags it based on the year-on-year data that we have been able to collect. And we know more or less where the numbers should lie to some extent. And we look at those numbers, and we clarify those numbers with the incubators by asking supporting documents when it's needed. We also, when it comes to cheaters, we also look at incubators that fill out the survey really quickly. For instance, if we know that a survey of the magnitude we ask you guys, and I know it takes time, cannot be filled out in let's say less than 15 minutes. So we also have sometimes incubators filling in data that is maybe we need to clarify that data, and so we identify that data and we clarify it with the incubators by asking supporting documents. Anytime a number is lying outside the norms that we know are to be normal, right? Then those outliers we try to adjust, or we cap them. In case we think it's a valid number, we also ask and we clarify that with the incubators. But because it might be that the incubator has had, or clients have had exceptional performance. So those numbers we must clarify with the incubator. But our system is actually very reliable, and it flags any kind of strange numbers, and then the next step is to verify it. We also look at universal variables, and we statistically, we also take measures to standardize the variables. So we don't have a lot of problem, when we are treating different kind of variables of different units. So we have some question where we have percentage question, we have another question which is a dollar question. So we have devised a very novel, very unique way of standardizing those variables. So we can add the data, we can add their performance, even if it's in different units, right? We already talked about the non-similar ecosystems. We use secondary sources to adjust the ecosystem bias, to also classify incubators into 5 different types of ecosystems, from developed to underdeveloped. And then we attribute, more points to underdeveloped incubators based on their performance versus an incubator that is operating in a very, very developed ecosystem. And apart from all this, apart from all the measures that I spoke to you now and before, we have a very, if I can say, a very stringent advisory board, who are external experts, who we engage at regular time periods to monitor the rating process and to monitor the whole process. So they also give in, their opinion, and they have been operating and they have been working in this space for a very long time, and they're very, very stringent with us. So that's another layer of quality control that we have to ensure that the results are valid and reliable.
Thank you, Dhruv. Guys, I just want to tell you that, yeah, we are truly aware that time is flying. It's almost 47 minutes with some hiccup there in the middle. We're going to try to go around 5 more minutes with 2 more questions. And then please use the chat if there's anything that we missed that you would like us to cover. And we'll take it from there. And of course, you're more than welcome to send us private questions afterwards as well. And then we're going to try to share them in our channels available. We got this question regarding, the sample size, that, hey, why does your sample drop so much from incubators assessed to incubators accepted to incubators benchmark when we showed? And I think they are meaning about, sorry about this map, and they're meaning about this slide. So this is the sample of the 2015 benchmark. And when we mean with that 1200 assessed, it's the desk research that we have been doing. It's emails that we've been sending out, and it's actually quite a lot of them, not all of them, that we've been spoken on the phone with, to check if they fit in the criteria that we have to be able to benchmark themselves. And if you remember, one of the reasons that I told you guys in terms of that an incubation is a program with a start and an ending, that is a lot of incubators out there that falls short on that one, that they don't have an ending and they don't have a program per se, and then we just say, unfortunately, you cannot be there. There are some other reasons as well, but this set of criteria that we have, that we feel that okay, they just don't fit in with this benchmark. But 500 of them, we got them to apply. They were quality checked by phone, 30 minutes, and you can imagine 30 minutes minimum times 500 incubators in 12 languages that we do in. That's quite a lot of resources and quite a lot of time that we put into to really make sure that those 500 meets up with the standard. And we have a time period where we are asking those 500 to complete all the necessary steps. And some of them, unfortunately, couldn't complete it in the time period that we have. But some of them along the way, they also realized when we did the validation part and when we asked them for specific metrics that they didn't have processes in place to extract some of those metrics. For example, graduated companies, the follow-ups on them on if they're still surviving and growing. So there's a lot of incubators out there that doesn't have a good process for measuring. And what they've said to us, which I think is a great compliment, is that thank you, UBI. Just by asking us these questions, you have forced us to kind of think of our process and improve the way we measure. And we will definitely come back next year to participate and make sure that we have the right numbers. So we are there as well, try to help out to set up some kind of guidance of what to measure and move forward. And of course, some of you have been participating. This is the third year or second year. It just gets easier because we have similar questions, right? So many are very happy, and it goes much faster the second year because then you already know, okay, this is what you buy gonna check, and we have it, and we've been monitoring it throughout the year. So I think we just heard positive comments to the second and third year based on that. This question I really like. When, where, and how can we meet with other incubators? Now that we've done a measurement, we know who the best are, we rank them. Okay, where's the people behind it? This is a people business, right? Well, we listened and we tried our best, and we're going on tour. And probably you've seen this, right? Starting next week. So this is our itinerary, the next couple of weeks that we have. We're going to San Francisco, and then flying back to Saudi Arabia and to Val, and then to Taiwan, to Torino, to Toronto. You heard everybody starts with a T almost. And then we are in Stockholm and in London as well. And these are events where we want to take the opportunity to meet you guys. You meet us, of course, as well, but also for you to meet the network. So please go in and to our website and then sign up. And doesn't cost you anything except, well, if you don't live nearby, the travel logistics. But we don't take any fee for the actual events, where we're gonna do quite a lot of fun, of course. But we have hands-on workshop, we have panel discussions, great keynote speakers, presentations, some insights, best practices that we are sharing, and of course the awards. But most importantly, I would say the networking, where you can meet all the great others. Brendan, for example, that is here on the chat with us, he's part of Ryerson University and DMZ, and I think he will be so happy to have you in Toronto to meet him there and connect with you guys. So please sign up and try and use this opportunity throughout this fall. I think we covered quite a lot today, so I'm gonna stop there from our side and kind of bounce back to the question to you guys the last minutes for me and Drew. If there's anything you kind of feel that we missed in terms of our business model and our membership and that kind of offering, we thought of just excluding that, at least for this webinar, and we can take that aside. But in terms of the research, the rankings, is there anything out there, and now that you have both me and Drew available, that you would like us to clarify even further, or that you think that we missed? And meanwhile, is there anything you would like to add, Drew, now when we come to this part?
Thank you, Ali. No, I think it was longer than we were planning, so that's good. We're open to all your questions.
Wow, was it that clear? I cannot imagine. Ron, I know that you always have questions. Ron thank you, Betsy. Please do that in terms of offline. But I think we're quite responsive, and we really like to be as transparent as possible and share the information. Um, uh, so with that note, yes, Pavey, we absolutely share the slides. A short summary, the whole recording will be available on our website. We will send the slides, and we're actually developing a more detailed methodology document that all of you guys will get sent to your emails. So you can yeah, you can take a look at that. In terms of that specific number, I'm going to get back to you, Brendan, of how many accelerators are part of the benchmark. Um, in our publication that everybody that are getting benchmark gets, we have a participant directory, and in there you will also see who all the 340 incubators are. And we are going to build some kind of a directory, online directory, where we hopefully can connect you with all of the others. Okay, it's 7 o'clock here in Stockholm, Sweden, and also in Barcelona, Spain. I know that I have my girlfriend waiting for me, and I know Drew's girlfriend is waiting, and we really need to be with them before the world tour journey begins. So thank you so much, guys, for being here with us. We truly appreciate you being so interested and asking these kind of great questions, and we hope that you follow us on this great journey together, and hopefully we can make magic happen when it comes to entrepreneurship and incubation in the future. So with those words, thanks a lot. I hope to see you on the different events. And until next time, please take care of yourself and all of your colleagues as well. Thanks.